Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have on the line Dr. Sandra Folk. Sandra leads a business communications training company specializing in one-on-one coaching programs for high-performing professionals. She helps executives and professionals all up and down the corporate ladder, whether building their own team or working within a large corporation with their communication skills, which is a capability that will either hold them back or propel them forward. So even if English isn't your first language, or even if you have a great way of presenting already, what's real important about this conversation today is that you will learn several important tips about how to master business and leadership communications with Dr. Sandra Folk. So, Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is going to be a lot of fun today. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about, business communication in general is a pretty wide topic, right? But I want to hone in a little bit about what makes that topic so interesting and why it's so critical for people on all levels, whether they're self-employed entrepreneurs or whether they're mid-level managers or C-level people. Why is why is business communication so important, and how can it be so critical to helping you close sales, to getting the word out, assisting in your marketing, all of that stuff? Can you please go through a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today in teaching this?
Yes, I will share. I actually was an elementary school teacher, and I worked. I was very anxious to uh, learn to get to teachers to teach them how to teach, and so I got my doctorate degree and became a university professor. And I worked with people, and I wrote books, college textbooks, and I wrote other articles. And I then serendipitously got involved in business communication. So that's how I got here. And I pursued business communication. It's very much communicating in business. It's very much like communicating with children, with teachers, with adults at the university. The important thing to remember is when you're going to communicate in business, there's one key thing you have to remember. You need to stop before you say anything, before you write anything. Why do you need to stop? Because you need to think about your audience. You need to think about the audience from their point of view. You need to put yourself in their shoes. What is it that they want? What is it that they're looking for? What do they want to hear from you? What are their pain points? That's what's really critical when you communicate with them. And my second part of this one big tip is this: you need to think about your words, because the words need to resonate with your audience. Whether you're writing an email, or you're doing a presentation in front of a large group of people, or you're in a meeting with other people who are executives or clients, you always need to think about your words. So, what do I mean about thinking about your words? Your words need to appeal to the audience because they need to be powerful, they need to be precise, they need to be persuasive, and they need to motivate them. So, those are the two key things about communicating with your audience, and whether it's one on one, small group, a large audience. And here's a perfect example of what I learned when I wanted to communicate and I was anxious to find out if I could get myself better well known when I first started in business communication. I had been actually interviewed and been written up in the national newspaper in Canada. I'm Canadian, and so I sent off an email with an article about Small Business Week, because it was Small Business Week that week in Canada. And she read my article and sent me back an email and said, "I'm sorry, that really doesn't work. You need to be more sexy." So I went back to the drawing table and I said to myself, what does she mean by being more sexy? So I came up with this article called what does sexy really mean? I sent it off to her. And what does sexy really mean in business? And she loved it. Loved the article, A, because it appealed to her and it would appeal to her audience. And I used the words that were going to resonate. What does sexy really mean? People always are interested in things that are sexy. So that is what I actually did, what I learned. The other thing I also is when I work with my clients, I try to help them understand that they need to use words that are going to resonate with their audience. For example, I have a client who I just finished working with. He's a commercial real estate executive, and he wrote something like this in his profile. I'm just going to read it. Maximizing the value or productivity of space in the workplace. I said, I don't understand what that means. So for you, you need to think about the same thing. Did what you write or what you say make sense to the people who are sitting in front of you or standing in front of you? That's what you need to think about.
You know what's really interesting about that example is that as you read it, it almost felt to me like from those Dilbert cartoons, right? Where and we've all, or at least most of us, have worked in those corporations where managers will come up with these things like, let's try to motivate, either the internal team or, the clients that you want to bring in, right? And they would try to come up with these terms or with these slogans that they think are motivating, but they end up falling flat, right? Because just by reading something like "we're going to maximize performance," okay, like and that's literally how it fell on my ears. I was like, okay, like, yeah, how are we going to do this? And usually it would be like another one or two sentences of more marketing speak that sort of talks to the whole point of we're going to maximize. But there was almost never, at least in my experience, there was almost never a, okay, here's step one, step two, step three, step four. And I think that's really cool, to think about. And it's something that, that people really need to articulate, especially when you're talking to an audience that may not know enough about a subject that you're particularly trying to tell them, right? One example I have, for example, in the digital marketing world is about chatbots, right? So you have the way to program these messenger chatbots so that they can answer questions automatically. But if you just come out and say, well, I'm going to give you a artificial intelligence inspired chatbot, for your business, you will literally find yourself explaining from step one every single time, right? So you have to find a way in order to make it interesting by starting out by saying, what will this problem resolve, or how this problem will make you more money, right? um
It's
this really
Sorry. I was just going to add that when you're talking about chat boxes, it's really interesting because when you have a problem and you go online and you put in the chat that you want to ask, you have a problem and you need to explain it to the person there. If you can't articulate the problem with specific words, they don't know how to help you. So that is why it's really important to think about what is it that I want, what is it that I'm trying to say, what is my outcome here. And this I wanted to add that this brings me back to a piece of information that I came up with. It took me a bit of time in working in business communication to realize what is it that people really need to understand. And I came up with this foundational piece, I call it, and it's called my four pillars of communicating effectively. So the first thing you really need to think about is what is your outcome? What is it that I really want to achieve here? Why am I doing this? What's the end point here? And I liken this to the metaphor of a road trip. If you want to plan a road trip, then you need to take a map and you look at it and you say, oh, here's where I want to end up. And once you know where you want to end up, then you go back to your starting point, which in communication is your goal. So now you know where you want to end up, here's your goal, and now you have an idea of how you're going to get there. So that is the planning of it. The planning is key, 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 key. And then the next thing you want to think about is your audience, which I just said is my one big tip. If you don't think about your audience, then you're in trouble. So you need to think about what is their pain points, what are the problems they're having, what are they looking for from you to be able to communicate. So if you want to grab attention in that first meeting you have with a client, you need to research them and understand what their needs are. And then the last thing is, which I said in my second part of my big tip, is your words. Those words are really key, as I pointed out to you just before. Without the right words, you've lost them. So if you're doing a presentation and you're delivering this presentation, you need to use the words that are going to meet their needs.
How do you get somebody to, or even convince somebody that the words that they're using are wrong and that they need to either dumb it down or make it more exact, make it more precise? How do you approach that, especially with an industry that maybe you're not technically involved in, or you're not, like a subject matter expert in? How does that process look to you?
Okay, so here's what I'm going to share with you. Maybe it's a bit of conceit on my part, but I'm really quick about picking up ideas and knowledge. So I can quickly pick up what the industry of the person or the profession that I'm working with, and I look at the language that they're using. And what I do is when they do a presentation for me or they write something to me, I say to them, "What does this mean? I don't work in your industry. I don't have any idea about what you're talking about. So, what are you trying to tell me? These words are so vague. They're not specific. You haven't given clear instructions. You haven't used words that mean anything to the person." That is what I do. So, it's about having people to look at what they're doing, not me, but what they're doing, and to stop and stop, stop, stop. That's what I said at the very beginning. Stop. Take a step back. Look at what you wrote. Look at what you said. Does it mean anything? I'm confused. I don't get it. So once I say that to them, then they go, "Oh, I realize now what you're trying to get me to do." And after working with them in about three coaching sessions, they go, "Aha, I've got it. I understand it. You want me to stop and think about what it is I'm going to say or write." That's how I do.
Amazing. When you go through that process and you get them to have that epiphany moment where the light bulb turns on and the sun shines through the clouds and they actually get it, what have you seen is the net result of that breakthrough? How does that affect their business? How does that affect their sales? Like, how does that come into play when when they have to rewrite their marketing material or redo the content that's on their site? What have you seen as the net effect of that?
Here's a perfect example. This gentleman who I told you about, the real estate, the vice president of commercial real estate, he had a meeting with someone and he already decided beforehand that this woman was going to be difficult to work with. And she was a different generation than he is. She was older than he is, so she wouldn't understand. And I said to him, "Why are you assuming all these things that you already think that she's not going to be able to do?" And he had to get to her in order to get to the ultimate client in the president of the company who he wanted the business with. And I said, "Stop. Think about it. You need to approach it differently. You need to talk differently to this woman when you meet with her. Here's what you need to do." And he did. And amazingly, he came back to me the next week and said, "Sandra, it was amazing. I was so successful and it all worked out. And yes, she's going to make sure that this gentleman who was the ultimate client, who is going to do some leasing of commercial space, will lease that property." So there's a perfect example of what happened.
Amazing. I love stories like that because basically what happens is that, we're talking about breakthroughs. Somebody came to you with a real problem, and, you need to recognize that you have a problem first before you can engage a coach, before you can engage somebody in order to make sure that it actually gets, attended to. So, excellent example. Thank you so much for that. Can you please let everyone know how they can learn more about you and how they can reach out to you directly if they'd like to learn more.
Yes. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website, which is www.drsandrafolk.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I have a profile on LinkedIn. I do a lot of writing. I also, if you want to reach me, I have an email address, Sandra at Dr. It's DR, same as my website, drsandrafolk.com. I would be delighted to have you connect with me to learn more about how I work and what I do to make a difference for you. Because for me, it's always about my audience. What are they going to accomplish? Can they walk away and be happy with what we did?
Amazing stuff. Sandra, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time and breaking this all down for us. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and it's definitely something that all marketers at any level need to have on top of mind, because you really need to think about who you're talking to and how to convey in the easiest way possible what it is that you do and how you can make them more money. So,
Yeah.
Sandra, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I really enjoyed being here. You're great. You're great. You're really good at being the presenter here. That's great. I really enjoyed
Thank you
it.
so much. I really appreciate it.